this is how we're going to do it. Let's give a round of applause for our beautiful and amazing people on the Angular team. So we have Frosty in a very distinguishing black jacket that you can see in the dark. And Joe is over there, right over there, waving his hands. When you have a question, just start flailing your arms and screaming, and they'll come bring you a mic. Oh, there's one.
Yep. Angular core team, I have a question for you. What are the plans for WebAssembly?
I'm going to give this one to Mishko. Why me? All right, well, I'm happy to take it, but you're closer to the metal than me. Or Igor, do you want to take this?
I can just say what it is. Right now, we don't have any plans. We're not exploring this area much just because of the efficiencies of combining the user land code and generated WebAssembly code. There's a lot of inefficiencies in that area, so we struggle how to make it work very well, but it doesn't mean that in the future we won't be able to overcome this.
All right, I have a question for the Angular components team. Are there any plans to take the material components that are specific to mobile and make web versions of those?
Do you have an example?
So like the bottom tabs and navigation and things that are mobile specific. So if you look at the Ionic framework, when you go down to a mobile platform, the components feel like an app, right? Because they're using UI principles that are specific to mobile.
Yeah, we have a couple of things that are more mobile-oriented, like the bottom sheet component and the fab. But there's definitely more we could be doing. I think the bottom nav you mentioned is something that there's been a lot of requests for. And it's all just a matter of prioritizing our backlog. And so the best thing to kind of get those things up on the backlog is to go on GitHub and upvote the issues. And we do look at that when we're considering what to do next.
Okay, Aaron, you have a question over there?
Yeah, we got a question.
So the other day I was looking through the membership of TC39 and looking at kind of the different organizations that a lot of the members are part of, and I realized that there's a much greater amount of representation from other frameworks out there who are members of TC39. And so I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on increasing collaboration with that group or other groups like that out there?
Igor?
We do work with TC39. We do work with TC39. We don't go to every single meeting. We go to meetings where there are items that we care about being discussed. Special decorators, that's a hot topic that we are involved in. But TC39 is very time intensive. If you want to really engage, it takes a lot of effort, and if you can't do it, if you can't commit to that kind of time, then I think you're just slowing down the process. So we're trying to help out when we can, but not be there just to be there.
All right, more questions. Just raise your hand. And fun fact that I learned.
Joe, over there.
Fun fact that I learned during ngConf is that there are multiple Angular teams inside the Angular team, but no core team. So you can remember there is no core in team for Angular, if that helps. All right, Joe's got a question over there.
Greetings. As I've been learning more and more about RxJS, I've got dozens of subscriptions across my app, and I'm probably not the only one. But how bad is it, really, that I haven't been unsubscribing from them all over the place?
Softball.
Get out. No, you're totally fine. So there's different types of observables in the world. A lot of what most people deal with in Angular are going to be HTTP requests. HTTP requests are going to come back with a single response and complete on their own. If you're not unsubscribing, what you're doing is basically opting into promise level cancellation, which is none at all, right? it's not the end of the world. You probably should unsubscribe. There are observables, though, for example, that are totally synchronous. Like if you have like of123, by the time you get the subscription back, it's already done. So unsubscribing from that is going to do you no good. If you're not unsubscribing from other things that are endless, though, like say something from user events or something from a WebSocket, that would be bad. You wouldn't want to do that because that's going to leave resources hanging in your app. So the answer is it depends, but hopefully I gave you enough information to act as good guidance.
Thank you.
All right.
You got it?
Hello. I just would like to know why we don't have observables yet in the browser, in JavaScript side by side with promises, and how much time, how is the efforts to have it for us daily without any other thing or polyfill or something like that?
That's a good question. So the observable proposal has effectively stalled at the TC39 right now. It's not a no. The understanding I've gotten from speaking with TC39 members is that a lot of them don't understand observables. A lot of them haven't used observables, so they don't really quite fully get why it can't just live in userland. Currently, there isn't a champion for the observable proposal, so it's just kind of sitting there waiting for someone to pick that up. I haven't heard about any recent movement, but I know it was discussed in some of the talks that Igor and myself are included in. I think they happen once a month or so, about somebody picking that up again soon. So it's not completely off the table. It's just currently stalled for lack of a champion. Part of it is Jafar Hussain from Netflix, who I used to work with, was the champion for that, and he has moved on from Netflix to Facebook, and there I don't think it's as big of a need. So it's just looking for a TC39 member to step up and take it, mostly.
Hello. How do you take decisions inside you guys? You use liquid democracy, the Google votes?
Boy, I don't know if we have a recipe. We discuss things a lot. We have a process for new features where we go through approval that we like it, we have design process, and a lot of it, Igor talked a little bit about it, and then Steven talked more about it today, how we go through vetting with you in the community. Was there more specific things to your question? Were there more specific parts to your question?
No, that I work in a project called Neocracia, and we are trying to implement liquid democracy on communities and delegate the votes. We read the Google Votes article and try to implement that, not just on politics, but on communities. So the democracy doesn't be like one vote each, but you can delegate, you can make a better democracy. And Google wrote it, so probably you guys use it.
All right, nice, thank you.
Usually it's not that formal. The process, the way it works is usually there is a champion behind a feature. And if that champion convinces the rest of the team that the feature is useful and impactful, then we decide when is the right time to ship it, and then the team rallies around that champion and works on shipping that feature.
So Joe has a question, but just remember you have the whole Angular team at your disposal right now. So anything from Ivy to Bazel to community, anything you want to talk about, you have about 20 minutes to bend their ear, and they have to answer you now. All right, Joe?
Hey, just going back to the observables TC39 proposal, is there a quick reason why it should or shouldn't be in, or should we just go look at the conversation to figure it out in depth?
So all of the discussion around it has mostly been done in public out in the GitHub repository for the TC39. You can see a good chunk of that. I don't go to the TC39 meetings, so I only know what's relayed to me. And the quick explanation I've gotten is just a general lack of understanding on the part of the committee and no current champion. So that's the main reason it's stalled. Now, what I think part of it was like you were asking whether or not it actually belongs in the browser. I thoroughly think it belongs in the browser. We have promises there. You can build a promise from observables. You cannot build an observable from promises. It's a very, very primitive type, and I do think it belongs in JavaScript, and it would serve us pretty well. We have a lot, in JavaScript in general, there's a lot of the observer pattern you see everywhere. You see add event listener and other APIs where you're basically adding callbacks to things that are going to notify, and eventually you have to remove those callbacks or tear down various things. And we don't really have a unified way to provide teardown in JavaScript in like a single format. And subscriptions via observables provides that. So that would be one argument I would give. But again, I'm not on the TC39, and so therefore I'm not part of those discussions. But I think it belongs there, clearly, because it's me, I guess. But I suppose other people would have other opinions on that.
Frosty's got a question over here.
How you guys doing? This is a Bazel question. Really excited about the progress on Bazel, and it's cool to know that hopefully in V9 it'll be a little bit more automatic. What will it look like for a very large Angular app with a lot of lazy loaded modules and Bazel long term? Like, will we have to leave Bazel files on disk and follow that approach, or will it just kind of work seamlessly through the CLI long term?
Hello. Our goal long term is that Bazel should be able to be automatically configured from files in your project. And that includes understanding dynamic import syntax, which we've just migrated to for things like lazy routes. We need to do more work with the Bazel team to establish a way to do the build file generation that goes across languages. So for example, if you're using Sass, then we need to generate Bazel configurations to run the Sass compiler, but you'll have Sass dependencies that come from your Angular template or from your Angular component where you reference the styles URL. And so we haven't done enough design work yet to understand how that looks when we go across languages. Yeah.
Joe has a question all the way in the back.
So at Angular Mix, there was a prototyping tool mentioned. So how's it going on that? For example, I believe you could drag material components on. It was like a wireframing tool.
I think I can chime in with an update on that. So they are still working on that tool. We do not have any sort of timeline to release that. But I would actually point out that the community is starting to fill that gap as well. There's actually a tool from the folks who make Nebular where they're building this a similar sort of UI builder tool that renders to real components. So I would definitely check that one out.
Aaron has a question back there.
Hi. So this was the first time I heard about Bazel, I think much like many people here, or maybe not. But I heard that it's a replacement for Grunt or Gulp. I was wondering if it's language agnostic. Like, could I use it with an Angular JS app or React or anything like that? And if I'm in the process of migrating, if you would recommend me using Bazel.
Yes, Bazel definitely works across a very large number of languages. And I've also seen some usage in React community. I think that's intentional. In order for Bazel to be successful for the Angular community, it needs to work for the entire front-end ecosystem. Do you have anything to add? Right. Angular JS is obviously supported because we've been using Bazel to build all of our Angular apps. And so we have a lot of usage of ng-upgrade under Bazel. It definitely makes sense that if you have a heterogeneous environment with a lot of different frameworks or different languages being used, you get much more value from the fact that you can have a single build tool that once you've learned how the build works, it works across anywhere that you go. It's a big advantage for us and actually our team at Google because we can sail into anybody's app and we know exactly how to build and test their stuff. We don't need to go find a README. We don't need to understand what stuff you have to download first in order to do development in this location. So if you have a full stack and you use Bazel everywhere, it also allows engineers to be much more productive when they need to go across the front-end, back-end, or they need to go work on the React components, or what have you. So the uniformity does have a lot of benefits there, along with the fact that you can now build and test all of those things together as one unit.
I'm going to take a question up front real quick.
I want to add one last thing on that other one. Like you said, language agnostic. Bazel is the build tool for Google. So any Go, C++, Java, Dart, any code Python that is built inside Google uses it.
So I have two questions. First one is not everything Google uses Angular. So are you guys trying to promote to get it everywhere, or what kind of pushback do you get when that happens, or what's the plan there?
Hey, Brian, you want to answer this one? It's a good one for you.
Sure, I was going to suggest Igor answer it. Google has a wide variety of different use cases for different things for building web applications, ranging from internal apps that are used by 20 people a year up through Gmail and Google Web Search, et cetera. And so Angular is a great fit for some of those use cases today. Some of the stuff that Igor and Mishko talked about in some of the keynotes suggest ways to someday move towards meeting different parts of the market that are where some of Google's big apps are. And so Angular is used quite widely inside Google for some use cases, but it's not the right solution for every single use case for Google. And so Google uses the tools that make sense for the job.
Sorry, I'll go second question for somebody else. Is what kind of new components are you guys planning on delivering for material? Anything? What new material components will you be providing in the future, if any?
I don't have anything to say that we're working on right now. We're largely working on kind of the internals of a lot of our existing components right now, working on issues. A lot of our team has been helping with Ivy over the past several months. So I don't have anything really to talk about in terms of new components right now, but stay tuned and we might have more on that in the future.
Frosty has one in the back, and then I have two more up here.
Hello, friends. I'm kind of curious, do you guys use NgRx in any of your internal apps? And if you don't, what do you use?
Yes, we do. So actually, if you've been around the conference, you've met Alex Akrushko, maybe. He works on Firebase. Wait for your hand, Alex. Come on up here, because you should actually talk about this. Alex is basically the lead for NgRx inside of Google. He has done incredible work to get documentation and infrastructure and some really great ideas coming back onto the NgRx platform from Google. And yeah, maybe tell us how it works on Firebase.
So it works for Firebase. Obviously, as Frosty said, that some patterns, it shouldn't be used everywhere, and I agree with that. And I agree that there's a story that, especially like maybe time travel debugging and stuff like that, maybe it was oversold a little bit. Maybe it's less useful in some cases. However, overall, NgRx solves kind of interesting problems. And Thomas, just before the talk before that, actually explained some of the problems, how reactive things are solving, how the pull and push-based system work. So NgRx has its use cases, and for Firebase, it's been working really well. It's one of the probably biggest apps at Google that uses NgRx, and NgRx at Google used in over 140 Angular applications.
140?
Over 140. Yeah.
Okay.
So out of 1,000. So it's used quite well. Yeah, so we're happy with it.
We have a question up front, and then we're going to hit Joe in the back.
Two short questions. One, how often do you try out an ng under bad conditions like a slow PC or a bad internet connection? And secondly, have you ever tried out or thought about using the way StackBlitz is able to creating a fast Angular application with the usual, with the normal CLI, so don't touching so much the file system and yeah, doing like Electron app or something like that?
We didn't hear the question. Could you repeat it a little slower and louder?
Okay, sorry. So the first question is, how often do you make an ng under bad conditions, like a slow internet connection or on a slow machine? And the second question is, have you ever thought about using the way how StackBlitz is able to do a fast ng, like don't touching so much the file system?
Yes, I can answer that. We've been thinking about this a lot, and I think we want to do some work in this direction for CLI for version 9. The stuff that StackBlitz does is really awesome for making, for fetching the node modules on demand as you need the files. I really think that their model is a great way to get the build tooling off of your machine altogether, and I would love to see a model where we don't need to download anything to your machine to do an Angular app unless you want to work offline. That's really far out. I think that's a great direction for us to go. In the meantime, we have been doing work in CLI version 8. We reduced the download size by something like 40%, so we are aware that installing the toolchain can be slow, it can be flaky because there's so many packages that have to successfully install. And the global footprint, where we do we recommend that you install it into your global node modules, also has a lot of problems where you can get conflicts there with other things that are installed globally. So I think we would like to do more to reduce the download size, to probably bundle together dependencies rather than have so many dependencies appear on your disk. We'll totally talk more with Sacklets. I just had a conversation with Eric today about this stuff. I would love to get more of their technology into the CLI.
Joe has a question in back. Also, we have about 9 minutes. We have one more question in front, and also Frosty has a line going if you want to join it.
Hello, my name is Val. Intercepting HTTP call is great, but is there any way that we could pass some extra data to that intercept that is such that it is never put on the wire? Thank you.
Yes, that is probably the most requested feature for Angular Common HTTP, and it's definitely on our radar. There are some design considerations there that we have to get through, notably, like, should such metadata be immutable or not is, I think, one of the big unanswered questions. And so once we kind of have time, probably post-Ivy, to sit down and actually design that, that's probably #1 on my priority for things to do in HTTP.
Okay, we got a question up front.
I'm noticing something rather curious. Why is there only one female on stage?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. We've failed. We failed to have a diverse set of folks, and it's certainly not our intention. And it is our intention to fix this. And we're going to probably need help over the next couple of years to improve. I know Igor has some thoughts on how we're going to go after this. We haven't shared them because we're not ready, but if other folks have other people we should consider for hiring, we would love to know. Thank you.
We'll head over to Frosty's lineup.
So this morning, during, I think it was the keynote, or one of the keynotes this morning, you guys mentioned that because everybody's in one repository at Google, if you push a change in Angular that breaks everybody, then you're going to have a lot of unhappy folks with you. So I was wondering, what's your process for dragging people off of deprecated APIs? Is that more of a collaboration, jumping in with other teams, or do you just say YOLO and dive in?
So I can actually answer this one. Yay. So part of the process at Google is that if you break it, you have to fix it. So the short version is we fix it. What that amounts to is we run a lot of tests before we actually do submissions and make it so that by the time we submit the code, we have already caught the problems that would have happened. But the reality is that sometimes things do slip through and we roll back. You may see it on GitHub sometimes if we have to pull a commit back. But there is a pretty robust system within Google to make sure that all the tests are passing before you actually submit something. And we hook into that and have our processes ensure that we actually run those things before we ever get to the point of committing or merging into Google.
Do you want to talk a little bit about LSCs, just generally?
Sure.
The tooling.
Yeah, so there are situations where you can't just make a change and it affects 3 tests or something. There's a large number of things that change. To give an example of one that I just did, we now in version 8, we are moving to deeper level imports for material. And we had to make that change across all of Google. So it was 26,000 usages of somebody importing from Angular/material. So we actually... Microphone? No?
Don't hold the bottom. You block the. You're blocking the antenna.
Okay, so like 20,000 or something test, we actually essentially wrote a lint rule, which turned into the ng update that we provide in Angular material. So we do that and actually make a change that contains all of them for all of Google, pre-submit that, and once that is passing, shard it out into, for this instance, it was about 1,600 changes that all had to go through individually, and get everybody moved over simultaneously, or well, as close to simultaneously as possible.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have a tool where you can make a mega giant change that affects thousands and thousands of files, and then you point this tool at it and say, just go, and it will automatically shard it and send it out to people and submit the changes when they're approved. So that fortunately, Google has tooling for people making large changes like that.
A fun note for that change, it did hit the limit of pretty much everything we measure. I was being rate limited across everything. It basically allowed me to not make any other changes in Google during the time I was working on it.
So we're going to take another one from Frosty's line and go back to Joe and then go through Frosty's line. We're going to try to make this a little bit quick fire because we only have about 4 minutes left.
So this is kind of with, I know Mishka's talk this morning was kind of speculative, but it was all around server-side rendering, and we kind of fall into the enterprise app category with the open all day going between pages. But the component level hydration, like, is there any thought of bringing that through, like, as you're lazy loading routes, not fully building the whole page up, or should we be looking into more server-side rendering?
No idea. This is, as I said, it's very speculative. If you wanted to do it on a router change, you would also have to have a server-side pre-render the route. But at that point, I don't think there's much value in that. So I think that would probably go the normal path. But it's to be figured out, hence the disclaimer.
All right, Joe in the back. Oh, kind of.
So I had a question about Ivy. So I was pretty excited about what they showed for Ivy at ngConf last year, and it kind of felt like it wasn't that far off, but we're here a year later and it's still not out. So obviously it's a lot closer now, but if you have like some medium to large size applications, like maybe a couple hundred components that are actually in production, is it fairly safe to start actually looking at Ivy, obviously not in production yet, but just trying to actually get your app up and running with Ivy, like in testing or anything like that right now? Or is it still kind of in enough of a state of flux that things are probably going to change in the near future?
Kara?
Sure, I'll start, and then Kara's going to fix everything I say. So yeah, we've been working on Ivy for a long time. I think the main reason that we've been working on it so hard is that we've really set this goal as backward compatibility as one of the key tenets. Like, we had a prototype of Ivy that was working over a year ago where it worked, right? Like, but the principles weren't the same. It wasn't fully compatible with existing applications. And so our commitment to bringing the entire community with us is really leading us to spending all of this time on that backward compatibility, on all of those things, saying, hey, how can we compatibility compile all of the libraries that you depend on, not just your application? So there's a lot of different concerns that we're having to kind of knock out before we can let everybody just turn on Ivy.
Yeah, that's about right.
But we're close.
So if everybody in Frosty's line could just shout your question out at the same time, we'll see if the NG team can do it asynchronously. Yeah? No?
And we'll all respond at the same time?
Yes. All right, go ahead.
Hi. So recently I was working on schematics for the first time, and I love it. It was amazing. But one of the unfortunate things that I ran into was like the documentation was non-existent. And I know you guys added some basic documentation like 3 weeks ago, a month ago. But the way I see schematics is like a framework within the framework. It's so complete. They have tons of libraries inside. So I guess the question is like, is there any priority to like fully document schematics to make it available to the world?
Thank you for the feature request. I think we should probably include more documentation for schematics.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions. Oh,
I was going to say one thing that I'd love to see for schematics. It's a fairly low-level tool. It's it's a fairly powerful but a low-level tool. One thing I'd love to see is some people who are getting comfortable with them maybe get together and think about what are some higher-level patterns for schematics that we can make simpler. Are there things we can compose so that not everybody has to get to the real low-level mechanics of it, right? If we can provide really short, composable things that people can use and build their own schematics out of those, I think that'd be a big, big step forward.
And
we
we pushed out a big update for schematics, the official docs. So we have something there, but we know that more is needed. And there's an issue that you can add your feedback to. We want to know what sort of use cases, what sort of needs that you have so we can prioritize those. And so there's an issue there for that discussion, and we'd love for you to join in.
Okay, we just had, oh,
I
sorry.
was going to add one more thing. Ditto for all of the builder APIs that we are releasing in 8.
2 more quick questions.
I had a question for Alex Eagle. What is your favorite animal that is not an eagle?
Yeah, squid. No, shark. Shark. Go Sharks.
Hi, guys. I have a question about internationalization support. I think at some point we were expecting new implementation. Is it still in the works or no?
Yes, it is definitely in the works. So the short answer is that in order for us to land Ivy at Google 3, we have to work with Clojure internationalizations. And so that bit is done and finished. However, we want to make sure that the internationalization is available to the outside and the Clojure is not required. And so there is a bit of code that's missing and a bit of API that we have to do, but it's going to be kind of a public thing, and so there has to go through the design process, etc. And it's not a priority for us because we have to land it in Google 3 first. I believe there is a tiny. Is Andrew here? Kushner? No? Okay. There's a tiny polyfill that got written that allows you to actually use this a little bit today already, but it's going to come.
And the key thing about it as a user is that you're no longer going to be required to do one build per locale, right? It'll be a much more dynamic thing. So that's the biggest feature.
Yeah, so we can do, the requirement is that we need to be able to do localization after the component is shipped to NPM. And so you're going to be able to do the localization late. And also the localization can be done either as a runtimes thing and also possibly optionally as a build thing.
All right.
End of answer?
Unsubscribe?
Good. We're good. Unsubscribe. All right.
All right, so let's give a really huge round of applause for the Angular team.
Woo!